Thanks, yeah. It's great to have you with us.
Alafia. I always say Alafia to people and ask that they respond with Shah Alafia Ni because that common greeting is asking, may we have good health and be at peace with our neighbors. And I always ask people to think for a minute how different your life would be if good health and peace with our neighbors really were our daily priorities. For one thing, we'd all have health insurance and we wouldn't be killing our children in wars. So I just wanted to start with that thought.
Shay Lafiani. Can you start, Ye, by sharing a little about your personal background and what was your entry into a spirit guided life? Was your family involved in ancestor or earth honoring traditions, or was this something you came to be more interested in as an adult?
You have to understand that I grew up in New Orleans, okay? And New Orleans is a place where the everyday culture has the what I call the whisperings of Haitian voodoo, which is based in African spirituality and a combination of Catholicism and Native American earth reverence, along with European paganism, a soup, so to speak. But we came up under the guise of Catholicism with all of these things in place and also under the attitude that it was a part of the culture that was always whispered. So there were actions that I saw the women in my community take that the women on television didn't do, like making rain and picking wild herbs and interpreting people's dreams. The way things were in the South, a child was not supposed to ask questions. You stood by and watched what the elders did. They would choose to tell you certain things, but for the most part, you were expected to figure things out from the proverbs that were shared with you. So any question that you asked, God answered with a proverb. For me, I would see the women in my community do something, and I would say, Mama, why did y'all do that? On a day when I was being bold. Mama, why did y'all do that? And she would say, 'cause that's what the old folks say. And then I would go ask Mama Ludi, who was older than her, and she'd say, 'cause that's what the old folks say. And everybody I talked to would say, 'cause that's what the old folks say. And when you get to the woman down the street who's 103 and she says, 'cause that's what the old folks say, you begin to get it that the old folks are more than just the oldest person in the village. And so continuing to ask that question led me on a path that said, well, the old folks of the people in New Orleans are the Haitians. And then my life took me to a place where I was among Haitians. And I asked them, and they say, that's what the old folks say. And then I find that the old folks really are the Africans. And once I realized the whole diaspora, you know, got the history of the culture and and the many threads, the many common threads that remain in spite of oppression, then a whole world, several continents of knowledge open up to me. Several cultures open up to me. And that happened between seeing what the women and my mother's friends seeing what they did to spending some time as a gopher for older women. That's a wonderful position for a young person. If you're the one who runs and fetches for older women, in the process, you learn some things. They explain to you why it has to be high John rather than chewing John, and what this perfume is for, and what that is. And I was reading whatever I could, which was mostly trash. And then that continuing to ask that question led me right into the bosom of Catherine Dunham as a dancer. So now I was doing the dances of Haiti and West Africa, and feeling what it was to have spirit moving through my body, living with the people in the culture, participating in performances where the drums took you over, and realized that a whole lot of what I experienced as a child in New Orleans was direct carryover from Africa. At the Dunham School, I lived in the same building with Haitians and Cubans and Nigerians and people who were dancers and drummers and painters and sculptors, and was just inundated in the culture. Then, when I came here to California, I was a member of a dance group called Batakoto, and they played bata drums. We did the dances of the Orishas, and we used to create choreography and go down to LA as we traveled around performing. But there was an Ocha house in Los Angeles run by a very famous priest named Bebo. And we would go and perform for Bebo and ask him, is this authentic enough? Is this what would really happen at a Bembe? And of course, then you get invited to Bembe and you around priests, and eventually the drums get you. Eventually, yeah. So, so I grew up around the whisperings and followed those whispers across halfway across the globe to arrive at being this kind of an adult. Okay, now know that it was a winding path. There were times when I strayed off of it, you know. I often laugh to myself because I used to think that I was going to win an Oscar. I wanted to win an Oscar, but I got my Oscar.
When you reflect on your life, what are some of the core currents? I know you've been sharing about some of them, but you have such a rich life experience and also spiritual experiences with different traditions. How does your journey look when you reflect on it in terms of the core themes or currents that are there?
At the heart of it, I would say a search for a combination of power and beauty. During the period of my life when I was trying to be a good Catholic girl, even saying that Louisiana Catholic is very different from everything else. But what I have never been able to accept is spiritual dictatorship. I've never been able to accept that. I always have to have an emotional connection and a spiritual experience to the material that I am embracing. Anything I run up on that I can't feel, I can't deal, you know. And in my running away from the convent with its repression and its the church's refusal to answer certain questions, I was in Catholic school in junior high, which, by the way, people, is the worst period to send your child to Catholic school. A lot of people put their kids in Catholic school during the pubescent years in an attempt to control the changes that are coming on there. But that's also the time when you're most likely to rebel. Okay. And so being told things like, I remember the one that stuck with me the most was I was told that any sin that I thought about committing had to be confessed just like the ones that I committed, right? I thought, oh, well, there's a formula. Commit it and then go confess it. If there's no reward for not doing it, if that's just as bad as doing it, well, do it and run, go tell, if that's what it's about. And, ideas that didn't make sense for me, like, but so many, this prayer, that prayer would get you so many years indulgence off of your eternity in purgatory. Well, I have a Virgo moon, and I actually would do a rosary and tally. Well, I just earned 300 years, and I did the Stations of the Cross, and I just earned so many years, and I lit a candle, I earned so many years. And then one day, when I had a couple of million years, I subtracted them from the word eternity. Not a good investment. You see what I'm saying? So I've never been able to embrace a spirituality that required that I lose my mind and not be able to have reasonable interaction with it and or enjoy it. Walking away from that, I explored a number of things, right? I was initiated in the temple of the Fahami Temple of Amun Ra, which required learning about ancient Egyptian spirituality. I went through a minor station with the Green Tyra, chanting for Tyra. I did medicine wheel with Sun Bear. I've danced with Hare Krishnas, sat at Baha'i firesides, etc. And the thing that was made clearest to me when I was in the Fahami Temple is that there are universal principles that different traditions make cultural notations on those universal principles. Okay, as long as I can understand the principle behind what a group is doing, and it puts power in the hands of people and feels good. It has to feel good for me to have anything to do with it. I'm just not the long suffering type.
I have the impression when you share about your journey of the theme of being a trailblazer and also of someone who's reconnecting with or reviving traditional ways in
Mm-hmm.
some sense. And I wonder if you had the opportunity to speak to your younger self, if you would have advice for her.
Woo! Once in a while, uh, you will come upon a group of people or a gathering where people want to talk to your inner child and that kind of thing. First of all, I want to say that my little girl is running rampant, honey. She is not repressed. She has a good time doing ritual theater and storytelling and dressing up pretty and, and writing stuff and cooking and doing all of that. But at those times when I have done the serious kind of psychological regression things and got in touch with my child self, there is a motivation of anger at injustice. I saw that early, you know, and I've always had a strong physical and emotional urge to defend the underdog. That's always been with me. There are I can be watching something on television, and when the people who have been beaten down stand up, it feels as if I'm right there with them, you know. Um, Bob Marley's Redemption song makes me cry every time. And what I see as my pattern is determining a place where certain people are not allowed or privileges are being denied. And it's my natural tendency to go in there, change it, and then leave, actually. I've noticed that pattern um, in myself. I had an astrologer from the Church of Light who did my chart once, and she attributed that to my Mercury being in 21 degrees of Aries. She said that this is the this is the tongue and the pen that is a sword, and I'm sure that that's true because I can't stand it. I just cannot stand it, you know. And I think that that comes from having been a black girl in the segregated South, you know, watching watching injustice, having to sit on the back of the bus, drink from the dirty water fountain, enter to the back door of the movie house, even and especially the church. We could not go to the local Catholic church for white people. We had to go 2 towns away to the church that allowed uh, black people. And at one time, I actually tried to defy that and went to the white church across the tracks and sat in the back and got run out with rocks, people throwing rocks at me. You know, so I have always had a tendency to defy. You know, don't tell me where I can and cannot go. You know. So I think that that's at the heart of that.
Yeah, can you share with our listeners who are newer to the topic of ritual and ceremony what about ritual is so important? What has made that such a central part of your own journey, and why does it matter? Yeah.
Well, you know, ritual actually is quite natural. Most people have been trained out of performing ritual. Children do ritual automatically as part of their play. And in fact, I'm told that when the first rains arrive, the antelopes on the African savanna have a ritual dance that they do to celebrate the rain. People have a lot of unconscious ritual that they do. You know, if you perform an action repeatedly with a desired result, that's basically a ritual. When you get up every morning, wash your face, brush your teeth, and get dressed, that is a mundane ritual, you know. I tell people all the time that if you patronize the Shakespeare Festival and you go consistently, that is a ritual where you're reverencing that particular ancestor. A lot of people have unconscious altars in their homes. You know, you go look on the mantelpiece and there's a doily with grandma's picture and a lamp and some water, some perfume or something. And they don't realize that it is the longing for ritual space that they are doing there. Once it is brought to consciousness that you need and want ritual, then it becomes all about orchestrating your relationship to the energies that are in force at the time. I think I need to clarify that. We unfortunately live in a culture where we fool ourselves into thinking that we are in dominant, willful control. Okay. I often see people talking about commanding the universe. I don't think so. It's not about commanding, it is about energetically putting yourself in tune with the energies that are in force in nature, you know. So you do things by the cycles of the moon, by the cycles of the human body, of life and of nature, in order to be in accord. And this is done through the orchestration of symbols, you know. And when you learn how to do that, you are moving energy in the electromagnetic field that we all live in such a way that you can traverse the landscape much easier. People have learned that it's better to sit down and meditate first before taking an action. Okay. If you learn to sit down and meditate, recognize the symbols that are at work in your consciousness and arrange them in a harmonious fashion, it is easier to go forward. We're learning that because of feng shui. I'm so glad that feng shui has become popular enough that it allows people's consciousness to make the shift to understanding harmonious arrangement. If you take harmonious arrangement, add invocation, music, movement to it, then you are really being on flow. Okay? Ritual is so much a part of my life that I take certain things for granted. It's part of every day. I've incorporated it into my regular activity. What we have to do in this culture is recover from an overemphasis on the shadow side of it. It's really overcoming post traumatic distress disorder after the Inquisition. I want to say that very clearly, okay? Western culture is suffering from post traumatic distress of the Inquisition when all of the natural tendencies, the relationship to nature, the relationship to the erotic, the relationship to village life, all of that was declared blasphemous, unholy, and people were killed because of it. Okay, so the only way that Western culture could come out from under the tyranny of the church was to claim absolute detached scientific thinking, which became, as Houston Smith says, fundamentalist scientism. Okay. And in fundamentalist scientism, the entire intuitive faculty of a person is shut down or ignored or denied. But from my point of view, intuition, which connects us to spirituality, is the human extension of the mammalian survival instinct. Animals can smell better than us, see further than us, hear clearer than us, make other sounds that we can't hear, run faster than us, have fur and teeth and nails and stuff that we don't have that helps them to survive. For us, it is our intuition that informs every sense of touch, smell, sight, sound. When Claire is added to it, we are better able to survive. It's that other thing that we have been given. But in a culture where people are told to listen to the still small voice, but are called psychotic if you do, and who we only hear about the voice if it's telling you you're son of Sam, you know, that is just so dysfunctional that it is ridiculous. Okay. And so now we are learning that in order to heal from that post traumatic distress, we need to incorporate more and more sane ritual in our lives. Sit down in the car before you put the key in the ignition. Ground and center. Feel your body. Have a vision of where you're going and the route that is there. Give praise and thanks for the ability to be mobile. Bless the people that you're going toward. Turn the key and leave road rage in the compost heap. You know, you have to come to a place where you think like that, and it is thinking like that, taking herbal baths regularly, meditating every day. It's those things that keep me from, running down the street with an M16, blowing away everybody who gets in my way. This is what makes us sane in an insane world.
As a priestess, initiate, and elder in at least a few traditions, I'm wondering if you could share about the balance between this intuitive, direct knowing, spontaneous, instinctual aspect of our beings, and also upholding certain traditions, upholding certain forms, and are there guidelines for you as a ceremonial leader that help you to strike that balance between spontaneity and tradition?
Right. Well, see, this is the interesting trick about it. I had a conversation with a young woman one time who told me that she couldn't possibly learn anything from studying anybody's tradition that had ever existed because she was so unique that the only thing she could draw upon was her own imagination. Now, I have two problems with that. Item number one, I think here's somebody who's on the verge of a psychotic break because she sees herself sitting on the planet all by herself, unrelated to anybody else. If we physicalize that, that's a lonely, disconnected somebody. Okay, that's the shadow side of it. The other side of it is what do you think your imagination is composed of? What's in there and where did it come from? Okay. What happens is when you study a number of traditions and you understand the universal principles behind that, your consciousness is filled with the kind of information where you automatically can understand where the boundaries are and deal with them. I always tell people there is a difference between inspiration and whim. Whim is just, I'll just do whatever I feel like, right? Inspiration asks the question, what is needed in this moment and how can I achieve it? When you know the universals and you know the primary reason for what you're doing, there's a way to thread things together. In Jambalaya, I think in chapter 9, I gave an example of a rainbow ritual. So everybody knows it is a universal principle that if you're going to do a ritual, you need to create sacred space. Everybody does that. Okay. So we can choose to create sacred space Native American way or African way, but we got to create sacred space. We know that we need an altar. An altar is a place where it can be very eclectic as long as we're clear that northeast, southwest, center, up, and down are going to be addressed. You know what I'm saying? The integrity of the ritual is still there. Then you can get into honoring differences, which Starhawk and I used to go through this, where okay, I got you. Where for her, in her tradition, you put salt on the altar. In mine, you don't give salt to the ancestors. We solved that. When I was at her ritual, I put a bowl of salt on the altar. When she's at mine, she don't. You see what I'm saying? We respect each other's boundaries. What is difficult in this day and time is that we now have so much information available, not always from reliable sources. Now I'm talking about Wikipedia and other places like that, where anybody can go on and upload anything that they think, any whim that they have about something spiritual, and then somebody else can pick up that misinformation and think that they have the right thing and incorporate it askew, you know. There, because in the past priesthoods have been oppressive for people, there is a tendency to either just make something up. I'm about to write an article about this. Oh, I'm a priestess, and not invest in or respect necessarily the people who have done something over and over and over for years and have had a lot of experience with it. So to the well-intentioned person who is practicing and wants to honor Orisha, for example, there's a lot of material that can tell you how to set up an altar for Oshun. You can learn songs and dances and prayers and have what the Brazilians call an encantado relationship. That is, independent but devoted, right? You can do that successfully and know the limitation of that. There's a lot that can be done here. But there is a place where you cannot call yourself an Iyalo Orisha. You can't call yourself an Orisha priest, because that is only so when you've gone through the ritual. You know what I'm saying? You cannot just attend a workshop one weekend or read a couple of books and jump up and call yourself a healer, because when people do that, the people they service get hurt. You know what I'm saying? And so for the person who's starting out, I say the two most dangerous things is the combination of ignorance and arrogance. If you know that if you are arrogant, you're too arrogant to, you need humility enough to say, I don't know everything. You know what I'm saying? I bump up against what I don't know every day. But if you can, without loss of self, say, I don't know everything, I am teachable, then you can say, my ignorance will be overcome by information. But I've met people who are both ignorant and arrogant about their ignorance, and they usually hurt themselves and somebody else. So that's the thing. Oftentimes, the person who is really humble is the one who will receive the greatest inspiration, because they have no ego investment in it, and spirit will speak to them very very clearly. You know, it's 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 circuitous. You know, it really is. It's Damballa like. It's a sidewinder.
On a related note to this topic of tradition, I'd like to know if you could share about the ancestors and the importance that the ancestors hold in your approach to the sacred.
Now you know this is a 6-week workshop you just asked about, but you know, in terms of a quick answer, we have to acknowledge the blood that's flowing through our veins and the predispositions, the gifts, and the liabilities of what is in our DNA. That's looking at our biological ancestors. And a lot of people don't want to do this, you know, because there is pain and shame there and all of that. To that part of it, I say, you do not heal a sore by ignoring it. It will only fester. Everybody has somebody in the family line, who you'd rather not be related to them, but you know, you got the same thing running through your veins, and it definitely informs and impacts you, even if it's no more than to repress you because you don't want to identify with it. Then we have, you know, ancestors of affinity, those who we are attracted to, that has nothing to do with blood kinship. You know, I feel very at home in Southeast Asia and in New Zealand, and I can't tell you why. I just love, you know, I love the place, I love the people, I love the culture. Who knows? And then, in order to really be human, we need to learn how to reach across to those who we think are so unlike us. If we track it back far enough, we find that everybody at one time or another was indigenous to the planet and connected to nature before our history started pulling us away. If we track it back far enough, we find out through mitochondrial DNA that we did all come out of Africa. And in this world at this time, we really have to take a look at the fact that we are the ancestors of the future, and what we do now will have that impact. So, just in a thinking way, that's important. But in practical ancestor reverence, I want to say that the intelligence and the emotions and the actions and the energy of the ancestors has not gone away. Just because the body may be laying in a coffin under the earth, hopefully not so embalmed that it takes too long to return to soil, but the consciousness of that person exists as capsules of energy in the atmosphere. And when a person learns the right, put yourself in the right attitude, and learns the right invocations, and learns to ask for guidance and assistance for human beings who have walked the way I'm walking or deal with what I'm dealing with, I call upon the surviving intelligence of those to inform and guide me. I'm going to tell you how amazing this is. Two examples. In my class at ITP, one of the women came in with a basket of acorns, right? And as the day passed, she was cleaning up the altar and said, "Tish, would you like to have these?" Okay. One of the ancestors on my shrine is a spirit who was involved in Underground Railroad and liberating people from plantations and things. And she always asked for acorn bread. So getting acorn flour is something that I often have. This woman don't know nothing about me and my ancestors, but here, have a basket of acorns. So that same basket of acorns is sitting on my shrine, and another woman who knows nothing about it comes, walks past my shrine, goes in the other room. We're sitting there talking, and she says, "Tisha, you know, I don't mean to be presumptuous or nothing, but you know, I keep getting the feeling that there is a young Indian woman who's trying to tell me to say something to you, and this is her message." You know, the woman's apologizing. I said, "Don't apologize. Just tell me what she's saying." The message is from my mother's mother, who's a Choctaw woman who made acorn bread. You see what I'm saying? And it teaches you to pay attention to the patterns that are unfolding in your life. Okay? If I have sat in front of my ancestor shrine and asked for a specific thing, it puts me on yellow alert to take a good look at every person that I meet, because they are going to answer me through the medium of another human being. When you get to that level with it, you are never, ever alone. And I want to say to the people who feel like, you know, there may be some monsters in your ancestry, there are ways to heal that. There are ways to heal that energy. To the ones who say, "Oh, I'm just a Heinz 57 variety mutt," I've heard that. That's not true. And that attitude is impacting your self esteem. To the ones who say, "Well, my ancestors allowed me to fall into oppression," everybody, from what I can tell, everybody at one time or another has oppressed somebody else and themselves. And at this point in human history, we really need to get over it. We really need to stop it.
That leads me to the next question. I hear you saying that the work, although it's difficult, is well worth it to
Yes.
get to know and love our specific family ancestors.
Yes.
I'm wondering also what you've noticed in your decades of doing ancestor work with and for others, how you've seen working with the ancestors to bring medicine for healing collective poisons like sexism, racism, homophobia, etc.
There's another one of them 12-week classes that you want. We have a national ceremony called the Ma'afa, Maafa. The Ma'afa is done on the seaboards of New York, of the Carolinas, of Louisiana, at the seashore, even here in the Bay Area. And the Ma'afa is designed to resurrect, honor, and reclaim the energy of the people who either leaped overboard or were thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. Millions of people were thrown in the ocean as human cargo. That whole journey of sacrificing humans into the ocean was so severe that it changed the nature of the sharks in the ocean. Okay. The people who are the descendants, the survivors of that journey, many of us have what is called transgenerational slave syndrome. And a wonderful social scientist named Dr. Joy DeGuy Leary has done studies on that and is brilliantly articulating how both the descendants of the slaves and the descendants of the slave sellers and buyers have been affected by that whole thing. We have the DeWolf family. There's a film out called Tales of the Deep North, and it is about a young white woman who discovered that her great grandfather had slaves in Rhode Island, not Mississippi, in Rhode Island, you know. And her and her uncle, her and her family, traced it all the way back to Africa and went to that village. They have been traveling around showing the film and holding groups of people, black and white people, with the primary question being this action of enslavement injured the people who were enslaved and also dehumanized the people who did the slaving. Okay. And so both are wounded by this. And the question that they put forth is, what would healing look like? And so, you know, on a national and in some cases international level, uh, ancestor reverence as medicine is healing, working to heal racism. You know, that is amazing that we now have enough information about our respective histories and enough consciousness to know that this needs to be healed. You know, I think that those two stand out as the contemporary national examples of that work. It's huge. It's huge. And we have to keep doing
it. With that context, I'm hoping you could share with our listeners a little about Ifa Orisha tradition, which I suspect for many people is something they haven't even heard of, despite being, I believe, the most widely practiced traditional African way of life outside of Africa.
Yeah.
So could you just share some basics with folks?
Well, I must say, let me say that in back in the late 70s, when I was first coming toward initiation, I remember one of the elders said to me, he said, by the turn of the century, 3/4 of the world will worship Orisha in one form or another. You know, and I understood at that point, he said, and you have something to do with that. I thought, well, that's nice. When he said that, I understood that he was saying the world was moving toward a spirituality that had more reverence for the earth. I understood that back then. In that time, I have seen this tradition grow from something that had to be kept secret, that was illegal, that was misrepresented as spookism, into the light of day, into having faced the Supreme Court and become legal, into having UNESCO recognize some of our temples as global sacred sites, into going from being a tradition where arrogant anthropologists who assumed they were dealing with a bunch of savages wrote erroneous material to educated people who are also members of the tradition who are articulating what it's really about from the inside. So, we now have intelligible material about the tradition, available to the general public. Additionally, one would think that this tradition maybe would have only survived in places where there was slavery and the conglomeration of African people with native indigenous people with European pagans. So certainly, the United States, the Caribbean islands, Central and Southern America, Brazil especially, uh, the tradition it flourishes in Venezuela, in Brazil, in Suriname, in Jamaica, in Cuba, in Puerto Rico, and Haiti. But we also have temples in unlikely places like Israel and Japan and Australia and India and Amsterdam. And this is because having been made intelligible, people can see the universal principles at work. They can feel the power. And it is a tradition, because Oshun is so much a queen of it, that requires the cultivation of beauty. It really does. You can't build an ugly altar. Come on now. You can't do that. That would be an insult to Orisha. But for those who are, brand spanking new, the best way to explain what Orisha is, it is a personification that is making intelligible to human consciousness the mysteries of nature as they have been perceived for thousands of years and put in a language, both verbal and ritual, that allows us to interact with those energies. So I say to people, if I say Yemonja, I mean several things. I mean the ocean that is out there. I mean the energy of nurturance anywhere in nature. I mean a body of stories and songs and dances and costumes and everything that a number of people who serve this energy have developed over time. And I also mean um, a pre human existence entity that lives in the waves of the ocean, you know. And what is amazing is that I can go to my altar and invoke and sing and dance and pray and be in communication with that ever nurturing energy that we call Yemonja. I can go to the ocean and make an offering and watch the wave come in and take it, or have the kind of miracles that they have in Brazil every year when they do the big million people ritual for Yemaya. I can walk down the street and encounter her coming up the street in the person of that big-eyed sister in the blue and white dress who's taking care of, everybody's child. And I can experience her on all of those levels. I can read the stories of the lives of generations of women who manifested uh, her energy. It is a very different world from the insanity of attempting to live in a materialist monist mode where the only things that are real is what can be counted, put in a test tube, spent, or used to beat somebody else up with. It's a totally different world. Totally different world. So I guess that's the best I can say to somebody who has no idea, because in truth what I want to say to them is, if you want to know Yemonja, you can hear everything that I just said. But wait until you're mad at your mama, or you're depressed, or your child is pissed off with you, and then go sit on a rock at the edge of the ocean and cry, and you'll meet her. Then you'll have a direct experience of her, and you'll feel what I'm talking about.
In this similar vein of necessity or crisis driving connection, I wonder if you could share how Ifa Orisha tradition, as a tradition with deep understanding of the forces of nature, how the tradition might diagnose our current ecological crisis.
Ooh, we in trouble, y'all.
Are there stories that speak to that?
Oh.
Are there how to begin to conceive it?
Oh, we in so much trouble, y'all. The ancestors are pissed. They are really pissed because, they are reborn through us. And we're messing up the place that they want to come back to. That's one of the things. I was talking to a Congolese brother a while back who said that, the problems with the ozone layer was interfering with messages that we were supposed to be receiving. We have had over the last 5 or 6 years priestesses of Oshun who've entered the waters of the river, the Oshun River in Oshogbo, priestesses of in Venezuela and in Cuba, in places, who go into the water and who come out in trance saying that Oshun has said that if we don't clean up our act, she will leave us, Now, this is a famous Odu, Oshe Otura, where Oshun left the earth and everything dried up. We are receiving very, very clear instructions around what kind of things we have to do to not have Iya leave us. I want you to imagine, to realize that only 2% of the water on the face of the earth is fresh water. Only 2%. 3/4 of that is caught up in icebergs. Imagine for a minute what would happen if all the sweet water left the earth. It's over, okay? Know that we look at the situation that our drinking water, we're now in a place where people are buying water in a bottle. We're in a place where life-giving water is being diverted to decorative fountains instead of people's farms. We are, in places where entire villages are being denied water. And so-called bee farmers are actually raping the queen bee. honey, which is sacred to Oshun, is being contaminated with sugar water. The bugs, especially the bees who cross-pollinate our food, is being killed off. Outfits like Monsanto is creating frankenfood that kills its own offspring. The genetic modification of human beings and plants and animals is going on. It is like this insanity has to be stopped lest we wipe ourselves out as a species, because one of the things I learned a long time ago, the earth can do without us. She don't really need us, you know what I'm saying? And so we have priests all over the world who are leading rituals where we are singing and dancing and praying and placating the waters. I know that that's going on regularly in New Orleans because people do not want another Hurricane Katrina, you know. It is going on in places that have been hit by tsunami. I just heard that there was trash from the Japan tsunami that hit this coast, and that the trash itself was almost as big as the state of Texas. Just, I mean, trying to imagine that is mind-boggling for me. So, you know, I say to people, the first step is gratitude. If you got a glass of clean water, don't waste it. Be grateful for it, you know. The next thing is placation, you know. If there's a Sweetwater stream anywhere near you, just go there and say thanks. The next thing is work. Clean up, pick up the trash, you know. Move some rocks, help the water to flow. And kindness to others, you know. I had a situation the other day where the woman behind the counter couldn't understand why I was giving some money to the woman standing next to me. Outside, she had said to me, would you go across the street, would you come across the street with me and buy me a chicken sandwich because I haven't eaten. I told her, come in here with me, and once I buy my food, if I have any change, I'll give you some, which I knew I would have some change. So the woman comes in with me, and the one behind the counter is shooting her hateful darts and just wanting her to get out. I said, no, I'm going to give her some money. So I give her some money. And the woman behind the counter says to me, what would it take for you to not give her some money? Well, first of all, it's my money. I give it to any damn body I want to, right? But I said, she asked me for it. Well, why you feel you have to give it to her? I said, because she's hungry. Well, why you had to give it to her? Because I am a child of Oshun. And what I know is anybody who is hungry deserves to eat. You got that? And once I did that, her whole thing changed. She came down off her high horse, and suddenly she was friendly to me. I told the woman didn't ask me for no money for alcohol or drugs. She asked me to buy her some food. I gave her the money because I didn't feel like walking across the street, you know. And so sometimes people get so callous and defensive that you can't tell the difference between somebody who's trying to hustle you and somebody who's dying because they're hungry. And that's the Oshun sensibility, to be able to tell the difference and to address that. So I'm saying that our salvation will come in a true humility, which is not bowing and scraping to somebody, but keeping your ear close to the earth and listening carefully to what she is saying to you. Now, I admit that I'm one of them people who are way on the other end of that. There are folks, there are folks who can walk outside and not feel the sunshine or the air and are totally oblivious to the fact that the plants are growing around them. I'm way on the other end of that. I talk to the plants, I can feel the plants, I talk back to the birds and all of that. I think it's much better. Everybody who's over here need to come. You ain't got to be as far out as me, but come on in a little bit. Because you live here.
The story you referenced of Oshetura and of Oshun leaving the earth, the remedy that's called for, or the repair in that story, is that some of what you're speaking to about the spirit of non-abandonment, of gratitude, of honoring the waters?
Yes. Yeah, in the Odu Osheotura, when Oshun comes down with the other deities, and they treat her as if she is unimportant. And she decides, rather than to indulge in any kind of fight, she goes sit on the moon and powder her face. And of course, no work can be done without water, and everything fails. Um, so when the other deities, Ogun couldn't forge no iron, Obatala couldn't shape no children, Kawo and Oya couldn't make no rain fall, nothing. The way the story goes, they go up to Olodumare, the Most High, and say, "Whoa, what's up? We can't do nothing." And he says, "Well, where's Oshun?" He said, "Oh, she ain't nobody." Olodumare said, "You don't understand. You can't do nothing without Oshun." So Olodumare sends for Oshun, and their first job is to apologize. Okay, their first job is to apologize. And one of my elders told me when he translated the Odu from the Yoruba, not only did not only did the others have to apologize, but Oshun told them, "Don't let it happen again." Okay, don't let it happen again. And then and only then, when she agreed to come back after giving birth to Eshuodara, then and only then could the work of the earth be carried out. Now, a lot of people are going to run up on lower echelon interpretations of Oshun's energy, but she is the unbridled eroticism of nature. She is the power of attraction that causes a particle and a wave to interact with each other. She is why atoms and molecules hold together. She is why plants entwine their roots and animals make mating calls to each other. Let's not get it confused, okay? The moisture, the sweet moisture of the earth is the essence of Oshun. Nothing can be done on this planet without her. But she requires that we apologize for wrong behavior, clean ourselves up, change the habit, and do the work of repair. And on that, she is relentless. I tell people all the time, know very clearly that one of Oshun's rules is that which is not appreciated is taken away. So, we got some time. We've got a few years to get our acts together.
Can you say something, Ye, about the role of heart and grief on the path? Because I know there's a lot of people who want to do the right thing, they get involved, and they don't necessarily stay involved. And sometimes I can have the impression that either they're too overwhelmed or they're not necessarily accessing that heart level. And could you speak to that?
Daniel, you keep talking to me about these 6 week, 12 week, 9 month. I've done a lot of work with people who were, survivors of childhood sexual abuse, domestic battery, ill health, ancestral alienation. Mao Shun is the Bukole the vulture, and she deals in decay, right? And the first thing is that the person has to make a commitment that I commit that this negativity will stop with me. And I'll do whatever it takes. You have to have that level of commitment. You have to have the courage to know that the pain you've been holding on to is going to hurt when you let it go. And there's the fear of what am I going to replace it with. There is an active patience that one has to have. So I often say to somebody, okay, well, I'm working with you on your healing. How long have you had this illness? Well, this happened when I was 3. How old are you now? Well, I'm 33. So guess what? Prepare to spend 15 years healing this. You've had it for 30. Give it 15. Okay? And most importantly, we have to make a difference between naturopathic healing and allopathic healing. Allopathic healing says, oh, here's the problem. Let's take a knife, cut it out, dig it out, sew it up, and give the person some drugs, right? The other way says there are layers of this. This is cyclical. We're going to work with it and remove this layer, and you'll live and grow, and it'll show up again, and we remove this layer, and you live and grow, and it'll manifest in other ways until, like a great big onion, we have stripped it down. That's why it takes a lifelong commitment to what I call spiritual self-health. This is not a Sunday go to meeting. This is not a thing where you are miserable all week and then you go sit up somewhere and you either go confess on Saturday or go scream a bunch of hallelujahs on Sunday, and then on Monday you're a mess again. This is get up every morning, wash, address the ancestors, connect to nature, do your work, make your progress, review your life before you go to bed. Get in the bed, be grateful that you made it through the day. Program your consciousness so that work is done in your sleep. Get up the next morning. And E.J. Ogbe says, bit by bit we eat the head of the rat. Bit by bit we eat the head of the rat. And it don't hurt to drop a little honey in your mouth with each bite. It don't hurt to put a little honey in your mouth after each bite. But that's a different commitment than just running in the doctor's office and swallowing a pill or getting cut And I also want to say, I don't mean no harm to my friends who are therapists. But I've encountered too many people who were in therapy for 30 years didn't feel the slightest bit better. Nothing was getting healed, right? They do 6 months of ritual work and go, oh, that don't hurt so much no more. Isn't that interesting? That energy left me. That's because that work may be taken into account mind, body, and emotion, but it's leaving out spirit. And a lot of times it leaves out community and the importance of that. And emotional and energetic stability. And acts as if there's no room for joy. So, that area, that's a well-intentioned profession. And the profession needs some help. I actually know people who are reaching for that help. But, I'm concerned about the men and women coming back from the war. For me, at my age, there's some things that make me feel like I've been thrown back to the 70s. I thought we were progressing, but we've been running in place, and some things have thrown us back. I used to have nightmares. I remember a distinct nightmare I used to have where I would be walking down the street and there would be this amorphous mass coming toward me, and it felt really terrible. And as it got up on me, it was these men. Half of the face would be blown off, an arm missing, a leg missing, a big hole in their gut. These were the men who were coming back from Vietnam. I saw something like that again when the AIDS epidemic hit. And I'm seeing it again. And I don't like that. It feels really huge. So, the best I can do is perform ritual around it and talk to people who are going to be in a position to provide services for these men and women. But I don't know how many services there are and how much those services are open to the spiritual healing that they're going to need.
Yeah.
So that's on my mind. So I play Kato Goon a lot.
I am grateful for the opportunity to just sit and talk in this way. I feel like we could talk for days, and I'm interested as we head toward completion to just have the space be open for you in terms of whatever is on your heart, whatever you would want to convey to people listening.
Well, the joy of my life right now is me maturing as a mixed media artist. Okay. I have been painting and sewing and crafting and creating stuff out of cardboard and stones and bones and matchsticks and spice and leaves, you know. Right now, I have an exhibit at the Sacred Well that I am very proud of. I'm going to have prints available for purchase on my website. And I am really, really stepping into that place of rendering the knowledge and the beauty of the tradition in art form. You know, and I do it as a storyteller, as a ritual leader, and as a writer, but I'm adding the visual arts to that. So I'm very, very happy about that. On the very, very personal side, you know, as I was saying earlier today, my books are always a reflection of my interests, my hopes, and my goals. And I've been moving around quite a bit, but notice every time I went through my library that I have a book that I've had, I think, since high school called One Acre and Security. And so I realized that, you know, maybe I've been as cosmopolitan as you need to be. I've traveled all over the world and done all kinds of things. But in truth, what I would really like to have is 1 acre with a home and a couple of buildings on it where I can do ritual and do my art and my class, you know, teach some things and give lavish dinner parties. Oh, I love dinner parties. You know, I love cooking for a large number of people and just. In fact, some years ago, I was interviewed by Michelle Lee for New Orleans Medicines, right? And her great grandmother, who was 103 years old, was also being interviewed. And I felt really good because she and I were discussing the same recipes, which made me feel like that's what the old folks say. And I was 60 at the time. I just made 64, so that was 4 years ago. I said to her, you know, Big Mama, you're 103. That makes me a child under you, right? Um, what is your advice to me for long life, right? And she looked at me and she said, You need to give more parties, honey. You work too hard. And I said, heck, now there's a directive from an elder that I can follow. I can definitely have more parties. So I'm looking forward to getting my 1 acre and a beautiful home and having more dinner parties and growing an amazing garden and doing more artwork and more ritual. The thing about it is that once a person passes 50, you are clear that you have lived longer than you're probably going to. Okay. You have a better sense of how long it takes you to do something. You have a clear understanding about the requirements of your body and of society's response to what you do. Okay. This causes you to gauge everything differently and to eliminate dead weight, not waste time, uh, look for maximum result from reasonable input, let go of frivolous, activities and thoughts and dreams. And, sometimes you got to get rid of some people too, you know. So I've been dealing with all of that and feeling pretty good about the tomorrows. Now, like everybody else, been wrestling financially, but I can say without reservation that when I get up in the morning and look in the mirror, I like the lady I see there. I do.
Mm.
I think that's it, baby.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ashe.